Mic check 1 2. 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 Mic check. Mic check. Mic check 1 2. Mic check. Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Mic check. Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2.
All right, good evening, everyone. Apologize. We're right on prompt, but I guess from here we'll go to Ms. Carter. Or who's gonna do?
We don't have, we're gonna have, Mr. Salinas from McCollum Principal.
Okay, Mr. Salinas, I apologize. Come on up, Mr. Salinas, for the Thought of the Day and the Pledge of Allegiance. And I think we have some wonderful students on their day off joining us as well. So we appreciate that. So whenever you guys are ready, y'all can always introduce yourselves too, if you like.
Oh, my name is Alita Uresti.
My name is Tony Tabaco.
Okay, and will everybody please rise for the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now for the Texas pledge. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. You may be seated.
The thought of the day. The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. Martin Luther King. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Salinas. Appreciate the kids coming through.
Mr.
Ms.
Chair,
Ortiz?
and I don't know if everybody in the cafeteria here at McCollum High School know that Alita and Tony are district, they are named district individuals. Alita, did you get MVP? Offensive player, MVP, and Tony, of course, represents us in tennis and has done a wonderful job. And we're still working, hoping to get a tennis court built just before you. So congratulations. They got district honors in their respective sports. So congratulations. And hopefully we will see you again at the end of this year.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us and best of luck this season. We'll continue on and proceed with going ahead to call roll call and recording of board members. So I think we have our little clickers here as well. We'll go ahead and do so. And sorry, I apologize. It is a regular board meeting of the board's trustees. It's Monday, July 22nd, 2024. It is now 6:18 p.m. So welcome. All right, we can close the vote. All right, everyone is present, so I do declare a quorum. We'll go ahead and proceed. We also have Dr. Castleberry, our conservator, here with us, so welcome him. And then Mr. Soto, item C, recording superintendent and staff members present, if you may, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Board of Trustees, HISD Community. This evening, we have our Assistant Superintendent for Business Finance, Mr. Flores.
Here.
We have our Executive Director of Operations, Dr. Hinojosa.
Here.
We have our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction, Ms. Casey.
Here.
We have our Executive Director of Human Resources, Dr. Salinas.
Here.
And in our first board meeting, our new PIO, Ms. Garza.
All right, well, thank you, sir. And from what Mr. Soto and Ms. Juarez noted, there is no public comment. So we'll go ahead and proceed to the next item, which is going to be announcements. So I believe now Ms. Garza in her first official duties can join us up in the front.
Good evening, members of the board, Mr. Soto, cabinet, and guests. So we have a few announcements. These are just important dates that are coming up. So our first one is our Back to School Bash, and that's happening on August 3rd at our Harlandale Memorial Stadium. It's going to be from 9 to 11 a.m. and we're going to have a lot of stuff for our students. We're going to have immunizations, vendors, free school supplies on a first come, first served basis. We're going to have free haircuts, fun games, and a lot more. So we're really looking forward to this event. So our first day of school is coming up. So this is more of a mark your calendars, and that is Monday, August 12th, 2024. We're very excited for that. And then just important dates coming up. So we have our new employee orientation luncheon. That's going to be July 29th from 12 to 1 p.m. at the Baga Center. Of course, our board members and our principals are invited to that. We have staff convocation on August 1st at the stadium from 7 to 9 a.m. We're looking forward to that. We're going to have an Olympic themed convocation. We're going to have games for our staff. We're going to have grab bags. It's going to be very nice for our staff. We have our Back to School Bash on August 3rd. Of course, our entire, all our students and staff were invited to join us at the stadium from 9 to 11 a.m. And then, of course, our first day of school is Monday, August 12th, and we are excited to get our students and staff back in the classrooms. That does it for me. It's very short and simple for today. Just a lot of planning as we get ready for the first day of school, but we're excited to welcome back our staff and our students. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you. Any comments, concerns, clarification needed on any of these items? All right, appreciate that.
Thank you so
guys.
much.
We'll go ahead and proceed to the next item, which is item 5, information and reports. Item 5A, the student outcomes GPM 6 through 13, increased STAR and EOC scores in grades 6 through 8 and EOC. Mr. Soto?
Yes, sir. Ms. Casey, if you can present your team.
Yes, good evening. We have our secondary coordinators today. They will be introducing themselves before they introduce the content area that they oversee. Mr. Littlefield, our director, will be starting off the presentation.
Good evening. Tonight, we're going to be going through a lot of different data, and it makes sense to me to kind of maybe take a step back before we do. Go over some of the basic definitions. That way, as the data is coming at you, you're not having to go back and go, what is that? What is that? What is that? When a student takes the STAR test, they get one of 4 scores. The lowest score being a did not meet. If they pass it, they're either at approaches, meets, or masters. When the state gives these grades, these particular domain areas, what they're really doing is making predictions as far as how the student will perform next year. So when a student comes in at masters, students are expected to succeed in the next grade or course with little or no academic intervention. If they're at meets, then really what that means is they should be fine next year, but they have some little areas where they'll need some targeted academic intervention. Approaches, the student is likely to succeed in the next grade or course with targeted academic intervention. So when, we stand in front of you and we say something like, 70% of our kids were at approaches, one of the questions that needs to come up after that was, well, how many were at meets? How many were at masters? Because that really speaks more to the depth and complexity that we go into when we're doing instruction. So tonight, the data will be presented in a stacked bar graph, okay? The bar graph will be broken down into 3 parts. The top part being the gold part, that is the percentage of students who hit the master's category. The gray area, the middle layer, represents the percentage of students who earned a score that is in meets, but not high enough to be masters. So they are just purely within that meets category. And then in the black area, the bottom layer, that is the percentage of students who scored approaches, but not high enough to earn meets or masters. And there's a reason why we're going to present the scores this way, and I'll show you here in a second. The students who did not meet are not represented on the graph. And part of the reason why is we're not exactly sure where to put them. You don't want to put them on top of masters because that looks a little weird. And if you put them on the bottom, then all the graphs are 100%, and that looks kind of weird. So instead, you'll just have to take, well, if that bar is 70%, 100 minus 70%, 30%. Those are the students who did not meet. So we have these two bar graphs, both alike in dignity. And we automatically, if we know that they are 70%, we automatically know that 30% of the students were in the did not meet category. Clearly, that needs to be addressed. And that is one thing that we do quite well, is figure out how to address that particular area. The story that these two different bar graphs, though, tell are rather different. Bar graph A tells me that I've got a very, very small percentage of students at masters and a very large percentage at meets. While I am working on getting students up to the approaches level, getting them up into the passing area, there's also a great opportunity here to start rolling these students over from the meets into the masters. It's a huge population in this particular first graph. And so there's an opportunity there, what do we need to look at? How do we increase the level of rigor? How do we maintain it? Those types of conversations. Bar graph B, you'll see, tells a very different story. Here, you almost have the beginning of a have and have not situation. You've got 30% of the kids who didn't pass, they're not graphed, but then you've got a large chunk at approaches and then a large chunk at masters with very little in the middle. Here, you've got to start asking a lot more why questions. Is there a teacher that's, excelling beyond all others? Is there a campus that is leading the charge? Is there a campus that is, lagging behind? There's something very different going on that may not necessarily be curriculum based. There may be some, just different issues going on. So as we go through these, you can kind of there's going to be a lot of numbers thrown at you, but you can kind of take a quick look at the bars and see if you can, kind of piece together the story from that as we work towards increasing the gold area as much as humanly possible. So I'll hand it over to our first coordinator, Mr. Simons. We'll talk about science data.
Good evening. So for our STAR results in science, we had a goal of increasing 8th grade and biology STAR scores by about 1.5% per performance level. Towards that end, we did see some declines in approaches and meets, while we did maintain our master's performance from prior year to this past year. And then, of course, the overall category being the average of those three numbers, which is the number that is then used by DEA to determine accountability measures. With biology, we had a slight increase in approaches, a tiny decrease in meets and masters, with an overall maintaining that constant average from the prior year to this one. Now, having said all that, we do see a slightly different story when we compare these numbers to the state results in order to kind of get an idea of what that really means. Like, did we really see a drop in 8th grade, or was this due to something else? In this particular case, you will notice that although Harlandale dropped in overall approaches numbers, so did the state. In fact, the state dropped in all the same categories at all the same rates that we dropped. So while it may look like we dropped in places, what we really did was maintain our distance from the state, which is not our ideal situation, but it's much better than what it appeared to be, which was actual declines. So in other words, we did not truly see a decline in 8th grade, but we did not see the gains we necessarily wanted to see. So we were able to maintain that. In biology, on the other hand, we actually saw something quite nice, which is we actually grew with regards to our master's scores. Even though the numbers, just going back real quick. Oh, one more. Even though we saw a decline in masters of 1% from 23 to 24, if we now compare that to the state, we actually see that we gained 2% relative to the state with regard to master scores, which is a big deal. Because that means not only was the test harder, but we did better on getting students to masters than we had in the past, and especially relative to the state. Our goal ultimately is to continue to catch up to the state in all the categories, bringing our master scores up to as large as the state has and meets, and then approaches will be a smaller number since ideally the others would have grown. So the overall picture here being that in 8th grade, we were able to maintain our distance from the state. And in biology, we were actually able to make some substantial gains. The -1% in meets, although that most likely has to do with our larger gains in masters, meaning that the students who had previously met meets, we were able to move them up into masters, causing that slight decline there. Here I have the data for the different campuses that then led into our 8th grade results. I'm not going to read all the numbers, but there's a variety of results. And the campuses stayed about where they were compared to where they were with regard to the benchmarks at the last time I talked to you all, except that all of the campuses actually tightened their scores with regards to each other. So campuses that had performed more poorly on the district benchmark were able to pull their scores up and get closer to the rest of the district in their STAR results, which is a very positive thing. In high school, we see some very similar results where everyone was pretty close together, and there were only some small changes. Now, what are we going to do in order to continue to show growth and improve things beyond what we've seen this year? Well, the sad thing is, despite all of this, our science standards we have new science standards taking effect this upcoming year, which means that all the test results from before, we don't know where we're going to be at because the test is changing, the standards have changed. And so we're going to be really mainly focusing on supporting teachers in mastering the new TEKS, implementing some of the built-in pieces with that around phenomena-based instruction, and continuing our coaching with all teachers to help them all continue to grow and be successful. So we're going to continue doing all the great things we've done, but there's going to be a big focus on the new TEKS this upcoming year. And sadly, towards that end, also the state has changed the way they are going to do the test for this one and only year as we transition. So they will only be testing these standards that were taught or that were assessed on the old TEKS that are still present in the new TEKS. They made a whole separate blueprint just for this upcoming year, and then they'll change it again the following year. So it'll be an interesting adventure for the next 2 years. And with that said, I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Pantoja.
If we may, Mr. Samuels, I guess, is there any comments, concerns, or clarification needed with related to the science component?
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Cavazos?
Because the test is changing,
Mhm.
how do we base the growth?
I think the best way to measure growth and our progress towards that is similar to what I showed a little while back in comparing our results to the states. Since the whole state will be going through the same transition, if we take and look at the difference between our current scores and the state's current scores, and then do the same thing with the new test, we can say, okay, well, if we were 4 percentage points behind before, are we still 4? Are we only 3? Did we grow more? And I think that will take care of a lot of that. And that also helps cut out differences from year to year with regard to how difficult the test is, which I think you may all have noticed that many of the tests were significantly more difficult across all content areas and quite a few grade levels.
Thank you very much.
All right, any other comments, concerns, clarification needed on the science piece? I guess the one thing, as we'll probably allude to everyone else, is what can we as a team continue to do to provide the supports that you guys need in the classroom? Because I know there's a big divide in between, even though it's small and it's closing, between our schools on one side of military versus the other.
Well, keep that in mind and we'll get back to you.
And I'm sure Mr. Soto will just let us know what we need to do. Yes. All right, well, I appreciate that. We'll continue on to social studies.
Good evening, Rubina Pantoja, I'm the K-12 Social Studies Coordinator. So we'll look at, I guess last summer, we had established some goals for 8th grade social studies and high school US history. Our goal was to gain an average of 4%. And so if you look here at eighth grade specifically, we did not achieve the goal. We decreased, in fact, from 53% to 51% in approaches, 24% to 21%, and then 9% we maintained for masters. And in a future slide, I'll talk about where we are compared to the state. And I guess I'll say it now. I think one of the things that I do want to point out is that even though we did not achieve our goal, when we compare Harlandale ISD to area school districts from Somerset to, well, not Somerset, from Southwest, Southside, South San, East Central, and SEISD, Harlandale outperforms all other school districts in eighth grade social studies. So I do want to point that out. And when in those particular school districts, they also saw some pretty significant decreases. One example is a school district that had 30% last year in eighth grade social studies, and this year they reached 22%. So pretty significant difference. Even though there's a lot of work to do for eighth grade social studies, I think that we are still working towards trying to at least maintain or get to state levels. High school US history, again, our goal was to increase by 4%. We increased by 2% overall. But if you look at approaches, we went from 89% to 94%, which was pretty significant, where the state had actually declined. So I'm very proud of those numbers. Again, meets, we did decline 1%. Masters, we increased by 1%, and then overall we increased by 2%. So if we're looking at the stacked graph here, again, the information is on the right-hand margin. HISD, we did for eighth grade drop 2% in approaches, but the state also overall dropped 3%. And then HISD or Harlandale dropped 3% in meets, and they remained the same, or the state remained the same. And then Harlandale remained the same in masters, and the state gained 1%. And so overall scores, even though we dropped 2%, again, we're still trending, we're still very competitive compared to our sister districts surrounding us. And then high school US history, again, we gained 5% in approaches, where the state remained the same. There was no increase or decrease. We did drop 1% in meets, but the state dropped 2%. We gained 1% in masters when the state dropped 2%. So again, Harlandale ISD and high school US history, we did gain 2% overall when the state across the board dropped 1%. So this is information by campus. And so you'll see that, well, we don't have the district benchmark data, but the district, if we were to compare district benchmark data and even beginning of year data, all campuses did increase on the actual STAR exam, which is something that I had shared in our previous board presentation. And then high school US history again. Overall, Harlandale High School and McCollum very competitive at 94% for approaches, 54 and 56 in meets, 22 and 21 in masters. And then early college high school had 100% approaches, 79% meets, and 44% masters. And then Frank Tejeda had 87, 22, and 6. So what are we doing in social studies to, I think, help with the numbers or increase student achievement? I think one big thing is that we are still maintaining the individual coaching. So that is, I think, Mr. Moreno asks, how do you support coordinators. I think making sure that we, you know, continue with the coaching model. The secondary instructional coach for me is integral to the support that we provide to teachers. And I would say the last couple of years, we're social studies teachers, we stick around for a long time. The last couple of years, I've had some really big changes where I'll have 5 brand new teachers at the secondary level, which is very unheard of. Usually I'll have 1 new teacher. And so, based on the numbers, I know I'm going to have more new teachers again this coming year. And so the instructional coaching piece is very important. The other elements I think you're going to find are very similar to the other coordinators. You know, we incorporate the new STAR item types because the kids need to have that practice. And I include that even in non-tested grades all the way down to elementary. So even though we don't have STAR in elementary, they do also see the new STAR item types at the elementary level. So that way the kids come up each grade level being very familiar with the new item types. Professional development focused on high impact teaching strategies. Literacy is a very, very important part of teaching and learning social studies. And so it's something that I always incorporate in my back to school training and the new district PD days that we will be incorporating the literacy strategies as well. Something else that we're doing is we're going to do instructional rounds with campus administrators, and then we're going to support also through district POCs. Any questions for social studies?
Any comments, concerns, clarification? Ms. Cavazos?
Yes, I don't have a question. I just have a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
I really appreciate when you gave us the information of Harlandale compared to nearby districts, because obviously we come here and our focus and dedication is for Harlandale. And sometimes, and I'm not speaking for my colleagues, I'm speaking for myself. Sometimes I'm so focused on Harlandale that I don't stop and go, well, wait a minute. Where are we compared to the surrounding districts? And so thank you for making sure to address that with us and to share that with us, because it just changes my perspective of we've got to do something, we've got to do something. Not saying that we can sit back and just enjoy the ride, but it's like, okay, compared to others, we're doing much better. So thank you for bringing that to our attention tonight.
You're welcome, Ms. Cavazos. And I think that's part of the reason why I brought it up, because I know that our work is with Harlandale children and we definitely want to improve. But I also think that if we're looking at, and we always want to reach at least state or exceed, but we also want to look at school districts that are like ours, that have children who are like ours, and how do we compare? And I think sometimes when we're looking at the numbers, it doesn't show that that part is missing. You're welcome.
All right. Any other comments, concerns, or clarification? I guess just on the last piece, if you don't mind expanding on, based off the information that you've provided to us, is there a way that you could provide a clear understanding for our team in terms of the potential reason or rationale on why there's such a disparity between the results on the 8th grade versus the high school? Because we see that, you know, the high school could be practically an A and we could just focus on them, right?
Right.
But in our middle schools, so what can we do continuously, like you mentioned, to provide that support?
So I will say that, I mean, there are various factors or variables that are at play in terms of the difference between 8th grade social studies and high school U.S. history. And I mentioned it at our last board presentation, where there's a real big difference between 8th grade standards where you're using archaic language. For example, if you're looking at the Declaration of Independence, if you've ever seen that, compare that to, let's say, a speech by Ronald Reagan. The language is very different. And so the expectation is that 8th grade, 14-year-old children are able to go and look at the Mayflower Compact and decipher that, versus high school age children who have more command of the English language, and it's in plain language. It's more accessible for them. Another variable or factor is the fairly significant difference. I'd say it's about nearly 20% difference even on the passing standard. So the passing standard between eighth grade and high school US history is significant. And so, if it's nearly 20%, then that's also a variable. And, when you compare it to the state, it's historically been this way. Again, the state performs at 57% for approaches. That's the entire state. And so it means that it's a challenging test for eighth grade children.
Thank you for providing that additional context. I don't know if anyone else had any other comments, concerns, or clarification needed on social studies. Well, thank you for that intel and that insight. We'll proceed to the next,
Thank
which
you.
is going to be math.
It's going to be, yes, David Custer.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me come speak with you guys. When I spoke with you last year, I predicted a 5% growth. I knew that was ambitious, but I thought it was doable. And the way I came up with that number, I went back and looked at the state numbers. And of course, after COVID, everybody took a hit. But the year after COVID, the state jumped up 5 points. And then the next year, we had that new test, STAR 2.0, and the state jumped up 3 points. And like you heard from my colleagues, we really want to close that gap between the state. So I said, you know what, 5 points, because we want to make sure we're not just maintaining, but we're growing. Then I got the results and I was upset. But then when I dug around, everybody dropped. And what you'll see in a few minutes is compared to the state, we actually grew everywhere, although that didn't look like it initially. So that's what initially I thought was maybe going to be a not so good story, actually is something that I'm very proud of. So kind of moving forward. So what we see happening in our grade 6 or 8 math, we did drop. But if you notice, the masters went up a little bit, and that's a success. But once again, these numbers are without context. So we dropped 2.6% overall. But when I look at the state numbers, and we're still behind the state, but for our meets, we dropped 1.5, the state dropped 2. For our masters, we gained 0.4, the state dropped 1. And overall, we dropped 2.6, but the state dropped 3. So ironically, even though it looks like, oh my gosh, we're going backwards less quickly, which I think really reflects, like some of my other colleagues have said, there was a difference in the difficulty of the assessment this year. So to me, looking at that relative growth is probably a better indicator than looking at the absolute numbers. So yes, it dropped. I wasn't happy about it, but compared to the state, we are closing the gaps. These are our individual campuses. I think each campus has its own unique story, and I don't want to go into each one right now. But this was provided to you guys to look at. And of course, I'm working with each campus individually to figure out how to best support them and their needs. For middle school algebra, and remember, these are our stronger students. We have nearly 100% of our students being successful, but we did see a slip in our masters a little bit. So that's something that I'm going to work on this year, because we want to make sure our strongest students are getting challenged. And that's something we need to make sure we'll continue to do. So when I look at comparing middle school algebra with the state, you'll see that we're above the state, but our meets dropped 4.6. The state was flat. We gained 0.7% masters, the state gained 1. And we dropped 1.9% overall, and the state gained 1. So once again, we're above the state, but we need to make sure we turn those kids who are in the black area, which are our approaches kids, more into the gold area. And that's one of my high focuses for this year. Once again, I've got the data for each individual middle school. These are the algebra students only. And approaches numbers are very nice, but those meets and masters, we will need to make sure we're paying attention to that as well. This one I'm really proud of. Our high school algebra has always trailed a little bit, but when I compare our high school, well, here are our numbers, and you'll notice that the high school algebra numbers grew 2.8%, and they grew significantly more than the state. I think this is a huge success for Harlandale ISD, and I really appreciate the teachers who leaned in to make this happen. Overall, the state stayed flat. We grew 2.5% in meets, which is significant. In masters, the state gained 1, we gained 3. And overall, the state gained 1 and we gained 2.8. So I really feel that's a highlight of the work that our teachers are doing with our students. These are our individual campus numbers. I'll leave those up for just a moment. And now I want to talk a little bit about what we did and what we need to do kind of moving forwards. Don't know why this isn't black, or I'll have to squint. So what we want to keep doing is emphasize what I'm calling productive struggle, making sure students have to solve problems in multiple ways, making sure students are given open-ended real-world scenarios and have to explain their thinking. I want to highlight that the high schools really leaned into that this year, and I think that's one reason we saw that growth, because when I went to high school classrooms, I didn't see them just practicing math. I saw them solving real-world problems and really challenging the kids to step up and think critically. We used some district created assessments that I feel were very closely aligned to STAR 2.0. My teachers have told me that they like those assessments. We're going to use those same assessments this year because they felt that were reliable and measure what the students knew. I'm going to continue to conduct regular classroom observations and provide feedback to individual teachers as well as campus PLCs. And I'll work with campus leaders to make sure that we are looking at common problems and working side by side to be successful. And once again, those are things we did this year and will continue to do. Moving forward, I purchased something called Pair Assessment, which will let teachers create very easily STAR 2.0 type questions, and it will track student mastery over time so we can see if students are performing on specific standards. I'll be doing PD with them next week on that, and every teacher has access to this tool. What you guys asked a few minutes ago is what can you do to help? One thing you help is has got to be a math coach. So my new math coach started today. And so I'll have an additional person to help support me with campuses. That person is an expert in middle school instruction, and we're working primarily with our 6th and 7th grade teachers, not only as PLCs, but individually to help our teachers be more successful. We're also going to be, since our new calendar has district planning days throughout the year, we're going to be using those days to plan high quality lessons that emphasize productive struggle, and then go and try those lessons as a district and bring that information back and compare. So we're now planning and reflecting as a team across the district. And finally, we are making sure we're including challenging activities in our honors courses in middle school so that those students are getting additional challenge so that when they go up to high school, they're ready to take on those more challenging courses at the high school level. Any questions or concerns or that I can address?
If I may, sir, I'm intrigued by that redesigning the middle school honors courses. Based off of that, what type of challenges are those students? I know some of them are not necessarily GT or high achieving students. We allow all our students to be in those courses. So what are the challenges that they're facing, and what can we continue to do, like you said, to make them able to meet that rigor at the high school?
So our honor students, our intention is to have them take algebra in 8th grade. So basically what we're doing is we're taking the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade curriculum and compressing it. So they're covering all of that curriculum in 6th and 7th. That's something we've done for a number of years now. But we're doing this year to make sure it's differentiated from what, let's say, the average kid is getting, is we're actually embedding lessons every couple of weeks that we're agreeing as a team. They're going to do this lesson that is higher rigor than what we're showing most of our kids. And so we're making sure basically that we have these touch points where we can, like let's say we've got a unit that's 2 weeks long. We're going to compress that unit and then add these additional days of rigorous and higher level instruction. And we're including that as part of our district resources. So I'm teaching 6th grade and I've got my honors kids and I've got my regular kids. I now have a pool of resources I can pull from to make sure I'm going that extra mile so that my kids who are ready for that challenge are getting that additional rigor.
Any other comments, concerns, or clarification needed on math related?
Thank you for your time, Mr. Pozos.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, board members. My name is Justin Pozos, the LAR Secondary Coordinator, and I'm going to share with you some of our reading data and talk about, successes along the way and challenges we're still facing. So let's take a look at that. When we first met up at the beginning of the year, The big goal was to increase 3.5% across all grade levels and for tested grades. And let's look and see how we did. For middle school, if we take a look at our numbers, we see a decrease in approaches from 23 to 24. We see an increase in meets, and we see an increase in masters, giving us an overall percentage increase of 0.4%. But I'll take that 0.4%. That was hard earned across the middle school area. One thing I would like to say just up front, the numbers that you're seeing are a product of the hard work of the teachers in the district. And that is in spite of 10 year-long vacancies in our secondary English language arts classroom. And just to speak to your question, Mr. Moreno, what are the things that we could do? I think the board has made specific changes or initiatives to make sure that we're drawing in those talented teachers that are certified we can put in front of our students and give them the education that they need. So just take that into consideration in middle school and high school and those tested grades. We were missing those teachers all year long. And so everything you're seeing is in spite of those absences. When we look at the comparison to the state, what we see is HISD gained 1.5% in meets. The state gained 0.6%. In masters, we gained 2.8%. The state gained 2.3%. Overall, we gained that 0.4%. The state gained 0.1%. So we surpassed the state in our growth. And one of the things that, you've heard a lot of talk maybe about the reading language arts test, specifically with the scoring of the extended constructive response. And in the district benchmark, I shared a whole bunch of numbers and talked about what that looked like for us. I have those numbers. I can share them with y'all if y'all want, but I spared you this time, But the big takeaway is that we produced a significant more number increase of zeros across the board, but that is the same for the state as well. And whenever they talked to TEA, TEA basically said the writing portion of the test was significantly harder for all grade levels, and it caused a decrease in all of those scores. And there was a lot of kids who received zeros across the state, which yielded a lot of that outrage that you saw. What they did say, though, that the other part of the test was a lot easier to compensate for that difficulty, so the scores could be comparable from year to year. One of the things that we had specifically focused on throughout the year was rigorous instruction in writing on grade level texts. And I think that what you're seeing here with the growth in our English language arts students is a product of all of that hard work of teachers focusing in on pushing kids with on-level texts to get them to write with sufficient level of success. When we put the kid on that test by themselves, they can read something for the first time, see a prompt, and generate an effective response. And so I think that is the growth that we're seeing across middle school, where we may not have seen it at the state level. So I'd like to commend the teachers for their hard work and taking on that initiative and really pushing ahead in those areas. We see a breakdown of all of our middle school campuses, and you can see, as Mr. Moreno said as well, that the gap, from one side of military to the other is closing significantly. Kingsborough still leads the pack, and they have done that year after year in terms of their approaches, meets, and master scores. But what you see as well is some of our schools who maybe traditionally have been low performing in comparison to their sister campuses, that they are now comparable in many of the areas of approaches, meets, and masters. And that is a result of good cooperation and collaboration for teachers, and also consistent support for all of those different grade levels. And I'd like to point out also FTA for one of the first times in middle school actually is producing master's students in reading language arts. So that was a really powerful thing to see as well. And I was so happy to see that. For our high school folks, English 1 and 2 EOCs combined, you're going to see a decrease in the level of approaches, the kids who are meeting that minimum threshold. But look at that increase. Good job, guys. In the meets from 39.6% to 44.3%, and in masters from 3.7 to 5.3. So overall, even though we dropped in the number of students that we got to approaches, overall, because we had those high-performing meets and masters students, we actually increased 1.3%. And again, in comparison to the state, Harlandale gained 4.7% in meets, and the state gained 2%. And that is really hard work on the work of these teachers. Golly, I didn't even know how to get emotional talking about numbers. And then so silly. I'm so tight into this. Oh my gosh. And then our Harlandale students gained 1.6 in masters, and the state gained 1.5%. Overall, Harlandale gained 1.3%, the state gained 0.5%. Now I'm sorry, I have to really say that my heart is in this district. My kids come to these schools. I've come to these schools. My parents have come to these schools. It's nice to see our kids doing well. So we can look at the breakdown of all of our high school campuses, and you're going to see comparably, we had gaps in our high school and middle school teachers. We're missing English 1 and 2 teachers, and we still pulled those numbers out. So Harlandale outperformed McCollum in a couple of areas. McCollum outperformed Harlandale. At the end of the day, they ended pretty neck and neck. Early college high school, we saw an increase in our numbers, and FTA saw an increase in their numbers from year to year as well. So that was really nice to see. One of the things that we're going to continue on is the implementation of our Think Circa across our STAR tested grades. That was our ELAR supplement that focused on writing and using on-level rigorous text and just pushing that writing from the beginning. And it supports the research-based instructional strategies that the state has pushed out, which is that teachers should be using on-level texts across the board, and they should be building those into text-based responses. And that is one of the things that we really pushed. We had about 90% buy-in. We had a couple teachers holding out that said, it's going to be too much for the kids. And what we saw is that teachers who pushed their kids to perform on grade level, guess what they did? They performed on grade level. It was really nice to see. We also are going to continue our intensive coaching model and PLC support. A lot of praise to my instructional coach, Kevin Kervin, such a talented individual in working with teachers and growing teachers who have been underperforming in the past and producing results for them across the board. So he's on board still this year, and we're happy to have him. And again, thank you to the school board for allowing us to expand our professional development. We are really taking that and pushing forward with bringing in a lot of outside talent and pushing forward in certain areas where normally we don't have the time to devote to building capacity with teachers, which includes building literacy-rich environments, building our literacy instruction for gifted students, continuing our work with this resource called Building Better Writers that is specifically focused on developing our bilingual students, continuing the push for effective use and ethical teaching of artificial intelligence in the classroom across secondary, really teaching teachers how to move into this new space of artificial intelligence and create opportunities for kids to engage it in a way that is safe and productive, so they understand how they can then translate those skills into the real world once they exit public school. And then finally, building various uses of technology to build argumentative text, which is an area that a lot of teachers really struggle in. Those are our big pushes for next year, just continuing the work that we've done. And hopefully we continue to grow and push these students forward. So thank you. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Any comments, concerns, or clarification needed from Mr. Pozos?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Ortiz?
It's wonderful to see such heart, such emotion, to see our kids That's what they need to see. They need to see the heart, the dedication, and they'll perform. We just give them the opportunity. We open the door. We've got to get them to walk through it. And I appreciate the fact that you're here and you're presenting, and you should be proud. I looked at those numbers and I said, these are fantastic numbers. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Castleberry, please.
It's clear that coaching is an important part of all of these efforts. I'm wondering if the district is looking at ways to extend coaching responsibility to others, so that in PLCs and mentor-teacher relationships, those kinds of people develop the skills, coaching skills over time. That one-on-one is really critical and important to help. So just, I don't know who that's a question to, Mr. Soto or
Ms. Casey, if you can elaborate a little bit on what you and Dr. Salinas have also been working on.
Yes, as far as one of the things that we have been doing within our department is we are working with training first our principals and administrators to be able to coach teachers as well. In elementary, we've started teacher leaders. We had a teacher leader academy the last 2 weeks with the primary focus of identifying teacher leaders at every campus who would then turn around and coach the teachers. I will say one of the things we did, like Mr. Castro mentioned, that was a position that wasn't filled, the math coach, which we filled. And we also had 2 other positions that we filled in elementary to expand on the coaching. So I would very much agree that is what we do. Our coaches in the middle school have been instrumental in that piece as well. But I would think coaching is a huge initiative for us, and we really are trying to have all of our administrators with that ability as well.
All right, great. Any other comments, concerns, or clarification needed? Ms. Ortiz?
Mr. Chair, so I wanted to ask Mr. Soto, and it's along those lines, because we did lose the ESSER funding. Those individuals that were in those positions that were provide the intensive coaching model, and we lost the ESSER funding has gone away, and what we were going to be doing to fill the gap, if you will, in order to make our students successful, our teachers successful. And I worry about that. And so we've already addressed that then? Okay. So
we're in the process of doing that. What we did at the end of the year is we kind of transitioned with the MCLs. I think that's the position you were talking about.
Right.
And principals. What are the things MCLs did that were so impactful at a campus, and how are we going to fill that need? And so we shared that. We actually gave that to all of our coordinators, elementary and middle, and then we looked at how can we fill these needs? Some of the things are very simple, making adjustments to scheduling. So we have all of our principals going to breakthrough coaching, which that's a primary focus, because when you have less people doing the same amount of work, how you manage that time is instrumental. With secondary, we also said, what are the components of every day that the MCL did? So PLC cycle is one which they could speak to. In fact, tomorrow we have our secondary principals coming in for PLCs, and we'll work them through that. So what we did is try to look at the most important pieces of their job and how can we fill in those holes with the staff we have through planning, PD, and then of course, looking at the data and how we do with that.
I have a follow-up question, if I could, Mr. Chair. So the individuals that had positions that were funded by ESSER funding, weren't they giving like overall and not specific to math, language arts, reading? Weren't they doing overall coaching? Whereas we found that the success of, if they were specific to language arts and not to be, if you will, a jack of all trade, master of none. And I'm looking for the masters versus a jack of all trade.
So this is an elementary, well, secondary, they are content specific. So they're very much, ELA coach works with ELA teachers only. Social studies coach works with, because they know their content. In elementary, we had coaches that were generalized coaches. And we actually, I don't think we shared this, we've actually restructured our coaching program at elementary where they're content specific. So we have, and we shared that with principals today. That's something that will be new this year. And we added, by filling positions that weren't filled, a reading and a math. So we will have reading and math teachers that will help support our coordinators, and then we have a math facilitator. I want to say one time Nora Lugo was presenting and it was asked, do you do this all by yourself? And she did. Well, that's no longer the case. She'll have a math facilitator, she'll have and a team of coaches. And I'm very excited about that support that we're going to be giving campuses and teachers for the next school year.
Thank you.
So I guess just based on the information that's shared by Ms. Casey, Mr. Pozos, everybody on the team and Mr. Soto, I know it's invaluable for us to continue doing the work for our kids. But I know as a team, we've done our part by adopting and accepting those positions that were presented to us in regards to expanding. Because I know one thing I wanted to clarify a couple weeks back when Mr. Soto was I was like, so is everyone getting their own instructional coach? And he's like, no, it's more, because I was like, well, Ms. Lugo mentioned like everyone in, so I was like, oh, no. He's like, no, we're going to be more targeted. We're going to be more, based on need. But we are going to have that kind of circle back in to the piece that we had, which initially before MCLs, we did have instructional coaches, a collection of, I think, 10 or 12, and then they would go out to various campuses and do the work to coach the staff there. But now we're going to be more specific and targeted based on content and also what you mentioned about the elementary. So it's good to see that we do have a plan in place, and hopefully this targeted focus will support the growth of not only the students, but the teachers as well. Any other comments, concerns, or clarification needed? Well, I appreciate everyone providing the information. I know you condensed a lot of it for us. We do appreciate the bar graphs and the simplicity of it. I think it was quite easy to understand and to gather the little nuances within it. Mr. Soto, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair, our Board of Trustees, as the question the board asks is how much more support can they keep giving the district? And as mentioned earlier, we did create a math coach for 6th and 7th grade, as you can see what the 7th grade math scores were at, the professional development of the funding, the professional development. But more importantly, some ideas that HR has come up with staffing, and it blows my mind that we have a shortage of ELA teachers, right, Mr. Pozos? I mean, this is probably the first time in many, many years that we've always had a shortage of math teachers, and now we have a shortage of ELA teachers. And so there is an agenda item there on consent of educational partners that we went over last week. We have a residency program with A&M San Antonio. And we also have, the retired folks that we ended up hiring last year that you guys supported, because we got penalized for that, right? We had to pay a penalty, the TRS penalty, to hire those individuals. So this year we haven't went there yet. We're looking maybe for the elementaries is like a 4-hour day split where they come in 4 hours in the morning and then 4 hours in the afternoon, so we don't have to pay a penalty. But that is the total support of the board, and I thank you guys.
Well, I appreciate that, sir. If anybody else has any comments, concerns, clarification, Ms. Cavazos, ma'am?
Yes, I'm just going to piggyback a little bit of what everybody said, but I know there are times where you all give us, this is how we're going to gain, at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year. And this is our goal. And I know there's always talk about, well, we didn't quite get there, but we did quite get there. There's a lot more baby success than there is going backwards. So do not sell yourselves, and I mean the teachers and everybody involved in these students, because that little gain is still a gain. We're still moving forward. Was it what we expected or hoped for? No, but we're not looking back. We're still looking forward at those successes. So thank you so much, the teachers, their focus. It is obvious and evident their heart is in the education of these children, or we would be looking back. So thank you so much for that.
All right, well, thank you guys so much. And I guess we can proceed to the next item. Mr. Soto, the board will be presented the school safety audit for June 2024 and submission of the Texas School Safety Center's District Audit Report 2 information. Is that needed or is that?
Dr. Hinojosa,
Dr.
we don't
Hinojosa.
have any, right, Doctor?
Moving on, and thank you again, guys, for joining us to a very long consent agenda. So if you guys would like to make a motion to approve items, to move to consent items A through AA. I don't know if someone would like to make the motion. Ms. Cavazos?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve consent items A through AA.
All right, wonderful. Is there a second to approve that?
I second.
Second by Ms. Ruiz. All right, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, before we take the vote, I specifically wanted to bring attention to item X on the consent items. X is discuss the adding educational partners and a pay rate to substitute teacher salary schedule. I want to bring that up during this board meeting because specifically, I think Mr. Soto, you and your team did an excellent job in bringing this forward for us to consider. It's forward thinking. We appreciate the fact that we're going to be able to compete, if you will, with those other non-named or sources or that are out there. And I think that Ms. Garza, I think that we push it, we get it out there. I started talking about it this weekend to some individuals and they said, what are you talking about? And I said, oh, we have to vote on it on Monday, but be looking out for it because, and thank you, Mr. Soto, for you and your team for doing this for our community.
And we're going to give credit to our attorney, Mr. Resendez, on this one.
Well, we got the idea from another client and actually Ms. Salinas, Dr. Salinas is the one who ran with it. So Dr. Salinas did a great job. Thanks.
It's a collaborative effort and we're all doing our best to make sure we're promoting the success of kids. So I'm glad that our brain trust is always thinking. Is there any other comments before we move forward? All right, we'll go ahead and call for the vote, please. Vote, please. Motion carries. All right, wonderful. Moving on to item 7A, which is information and discussion regarding requests for facility naming pursuant to district policy CW local. Mr. Soto, or is that Mr. Resendez?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Board of Trustees. This item has come up. There was a group of gentlemen that have approached us and we just want to inform the board and educate them on what's on policy. So Mr. Resendez will go over policy. If you want to know about the timeline on the presentation on what is coming around the corner, which would be an ROTC building at Harlandale High School. But at this time, I'm just going to have Mr. Resendez kind of brief us on the policy and next steps.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. So just in general, you'll see the policy there and there's kind of three ways to proceed with changing the name or naming a facility, and that's board driven, administration driven, or community driven. In this particular instance, there was some, as Mr. Soto mentioned, some gentlemen who were associated with folks in the community who wanted to see the JROTC building at Harlandale High School named after a former Harlandale High School graduate, Mr. Milton Lee, who was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. And Mr. Soto has been working with them about ideas. And I'll let Mr. Soto now talk about kind of maybe where they're at, because they have been communicating for a while now, if I recall, from the time they came to present till now. So, Mr. Soto.
Yes, Mr. Resendez, Board of Trustees, it began about February 26th when I ended up meeting with a group of individuals that came to my office. We're going back and forth through email since February 6th all the way to July 9th. And basically I had Dr. Hinojosa meet with them, tour the ROTC building, give some ideas on what, kind of collaborate on what they wanted, how they wanted it, and what we can do as a school district. They did view the gun range slash conference area where they wanted like a trophy case set there. Basically, this group wants their ROTC building on the outside to be named after Mr. Lee. Dr. Hinojosa said, we have other buildings that we had names inside, like because the ROTC building is in the bottom floor and we have health science tech above. They were more adamant about naming the entire building after Milton Lee.
Mr. Chair. So one other thing I just want to clarify, at the end of the day, even though the policy, you'll see CW local, at the end of the day, the board makes the final decision on whether the community brings forward, and there's a process for the community to get signatures and things of that nature. If the administration brings it forward, but before anything ever gets changed or named, this board or the sitting board would have to approve it.
Is there any additional pertinent information that we need to be aware of other than the information that's been presented?
I don't know if it's pertinent or not,
Go ahead,
Mr.
Mr.
Chair. I just would like to make a couple of comments. Mr. Lee, Congressional Medal of Honor winner, graduated in 1967 from Harlandale High School, and he enlisted in the Army and arrived in Vietnam in January 1968. He died in combat as a 19-year-old, and he received the Congressional Medal of Honor on April 7th, 1970. He died in April 1968. So the school district, I think it's been long overdue that we do something to honor a Congressional Medal of Honor winner. I worked for Frank Tejeda, who spent his elected official life trying to get as many Congressional Medal of Honor winners that were still alive honored in different ways, so that the city of San Antonio would know, and Bexar County would know who those Congressional Medal of Honor winners are, because if they're alive, they live just normal lives, but they're extraordinary events that happened that make them Congressional Medal of Honor winners. And I pray that we will be able to, however it is that Mr. Soto and his team decides to honor Mr. Lee, I hope that every day that that when they're driving down Pleasanton Road, they will know that this board decided that it was time that everyone in our community passes by Harlandale High School and would know and be proud that they had a Congressional Medal of Honor winner, because to do that is exceptional service to our country. So thank you. I just wanted to say that.
Would anyone else like to share any comments, concerns, or clarification related to this item?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Ms.
Yes,
Salazar?
I know Mr. DeSantis mentioned that whenever we rename a building to be able to honor someone, it would still have to be a community effort in addition with.
So may I clarify that? Yes. So the community, one of the processes through the policy allows the community to go get signatures of more than 50% of those who are 18 years or older. And there's some steps. Even if they do that, that doesn't mean it automatically gets approved. The board still has to consider it. But that's one way to get it on the agenda for them to have the board consider it. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what I did want to clarify. This group was aware of that procedural, because I know you and Dr. Hinojosa, I think, shared the policy with them. But this particular group was asking that they not have to do that, and that this board consider it. So I hope that makes sense.
I mean, only because I'm new and I'm still learning everything. And I know that we want to honor someone who's received the Congressional Medal of Honor. But is there other ways that we would be able to honor without having to rename an entire building?
Yes, there are, Mr. Chair. Yeah, yes, ma'am, there are. And I think, Mr. Soto, you had some ideas and discuss. I'll let you.
Oh, yes, Ms. Salazar, Dr. Hinojosa said we can do that gun range. We can put his name up, but that's all inside. This group wants something in the exterior.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir, Mr. Mancha.
I know that when Mr. Sosa brought up naming Memorial Stadium, I got to sit down and meet with him when he was a board member, and he had a hard time. A lot of people did not like the idea of naming a stadium Memorial. Doesn't make any sense. You know, let's name it Hardendale Stadium. You know, but he fought and he fought, and now everybody knows Memorial Stadium. And, you know, the plaque that was honored because of his struggle and his fight and his will to want to honor some of our kids. A lot of us don't even know that on Robert E. Lee in South Flores, there's a memorial to our kids from Hardendale at the fire station. Nobody ever takes flowers there. Nobody even goes there, near there. Why? Because it's ignored, because it doesn't make sense. But yet we remember Memorial Stadium. So you put it inside, it's going to be the same thing. Nobody's going to remember. Nobody's going to see it. Nobody's going to worry about it. So let's just think about it. We don't need to make the decision right now. Just think about it. You know, I would love to put it on the agenda. But I would also like to hear Mr. Soto and Mr. Hinojosa's idea about it. But I think it's a way of honoring our people. You know, how many of y'all even knew that there was a memorial of our Hardendale kids at the fire station on Robert Lee in South Flores? Guarantee almost nobody knows. And why doesn't anybody know? Because nobody is acknowledged to it.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else like to share? I think it's obviously remarkable, and you know, we definitely want to be willing to preserve the legacy of a fallen soldier and a true measure of heroism. Yeah, I think one thing that was also presented, sir, was we are going to have an ability to do some additional, I guess, renovations of the memorial actual monument at the stadium. And is that something that we could also look at doing in particular for Mr. Lee that gave his life so bravely? Or is that just something that is unable to be considered?
Sir, anything could be considered if the board chooses. It's the board's facilities. And so I just need direction on what you would like presented for the next, for this item here. We are looking at renovating Memorial Stadium, that area, just kind of sprucing it up. We reached out to Mr. Sosa to see if he wanted to be partaking some of that and have the community involved, because we're probably gonna have some leftover money and be able to kind of finish that little area off.
Okay. I mean, in my opinion, that would be a great opportunity to look at either something that symbolizes or embolizes the feat that he's had. And then, you know, there's still the consideration if there's something related to the high school that we can provide. I know it's difficult when it's something inside, you know, and we definitely want the community to understand. But at the same time, it's really for our kids to see it every single day when they walk through the hallways, right? That's something that we should also consider, I guess, related to it. And I think the difficulty is just because there's two different or two distinct CTE programs within that actual building. So I don't know. I mean, I know there are places where you'll have such and such field at such thing. You know, I think they even at UT, it's like Donald Royal Stadium at something field. And, you know, those are things that maybe we could potentially look at where, I mean, but we're going to have a very long name. So, but at the same time, it's something that we want to honor, those who gave so much and are in a very unique situation. So it's something for us to still consider. Is there anybody else that would like to share their thoughts or their concerns or clarification needed?
Mr. Chair, I just have a question.
Yes, Ms. Reese.
Mr. Soto, should something be done outside of, let's say, the building itself, right? Not a memorial of some sort out there, or whatever the case may be, if it's the naming inside and there's some signage, some trophy cases that need to be installed, who is going to be responsible for paying for those items?
Great question, ma'am. I'm going to defer this to Dr. Noza because he did meet with them and they did have conversations about that.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Soto. Members of the board, so in the various conversations we've had with them, the American Eagle chapter of the 101st Airborne Division, which is the individuals that were a part of the public comment that made back in March. So we have had some conversations as far as like some shared expenses or just some items, like we currently have some space within the campus itself in the front entrance that we could put some memorial to memorialize him in terms of like some photos of him or some of the family. And I've spoken to Mr. Martinez about possibly doing that, but in the campus, like Mr. Soto said, in that hallway, we've talked about various ideas, whether for ranging from a plaque to some items in a foyer and a trophy case, to putting the name as you enter into the gun range. So we've discussed various options, but as far as the funding goes, we've talked about split costs and some shared costs with that.
I think that's
Sorry, there was also, sorry, sir, there's also one other area, maybe providing a memorial in the courtyard area there at Harlandale High School where there's that big grassy area. That was the other option that we had discussed.
And have they been receptive to any of the ideas or just anyone in particular?
They were interested in looking at the different options. So we've had three site visits total within the current building and also throughout the school. So they were receptive to the various options, but those are in the pre-planning stages for them. So they really hadn't finalized anything.
So then I guess, Mr. Soto, before proceeding forward, I don't know if this is Mr. Flores, but where would the funds come from? Would it be the general fund?
Yes, sir.
But if we also do something at the stadium, it would be maybe related to bond?
It would have to be general fund.
So, okay. And has the group provided any monetary details on how they would be, other than saying they're willing to share? Have they provided any documented financial reports for us to know that, hey, they're for real and they're going to give us the ability to share the cost?
To say they've actually shared an actual cost, no, they haven't, but it's been part of the discussions.
Because I think it would be really important if they can provide some insight into how much they're willing to provide, then I think that's where the conversation can really get the ball rolling. I think that's really important because I rather us have all our ducks in a row rather than say, hey, we're going to name it, and then we're going to be obligated to do the entire cost if they're willing to spearhead it with us. I think that's important. Is there anyone else that would like to share?
Mr. Chair, and I don't know if Mr. Mancha knows this or Mr. Soto knows this. How many Congressional Medal of Honor winners have there been from Harlandale Independent School District?
I don't have that answer, ma'am.
Yeah, I mean, I think regardless, I think Mr. Mancha is, as we know, we want to preserve the legacy and the history that we have, and definitely the shoulders that we stand on. I think we just have to make a real tactful decision on how it's structured. And unfortunately, in these cases, it's not as simple as just saying we're going to put a name on the wall. It does incur, a financial component to it, just like when it comes to the safety of our kids. Yeah, we want to provide every single piece, but we still have to consider where is the funding coming from, especially when there is still a budget deficit that's looming over us. So But I think the team is definitely in favor of finding a solution and a compromise to what's the best for it. If it's the name of the building, then, you know, that's something that will go forward if the team decides. If it's something else in a combination, then we'll proceed. But definitely we are I think in unison in saying that we want to do something to show our respect to that fallen soldier. Ms. Reese?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, I believe it is, but Mr. Lee's name is on the memorial plaque at the stadium. Yes, right. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Luna.
And I've been here in Harlendale a long time, but I wasn't here that long that go to know. I know they renamed South Cross Middle School to Leal Middle School, and I'm sure they had the same conversation about this. I don't know what the difference would be, but I don't think Mr. Leal was a Congressional Medal of Honor recipient. Maybe he was one of the first Harlendale students to be give his life for the country. But you know, it's a twofold thing. Like Mr. Mancha says, you know, I've driven by that monument many times, and I thought it was something the city put up for their fire department, not something for Harlendale. And then the other thing is to consider is we are a military city, USA, so we should be honoring. We should be proud to be honoring one of our own. And I wouldn't think it'd be a bad idea to name a building after one of our Congressional Medal of Honor students. That's a pretty high honor in any state. So to have one of those from our district would be something awesome. But you know, I know it's real hard in this district to change things because they even try to rename Stonewall Flanders to Cesar Chavez Elementary, and the community didn't go for it. They still wanted to keep Stonewall Flanders Elementary because there's a certain attitude here, just certain tradition here that we want to maintain. So it's going to be a very difficult situation. So we have to consider all kind of possibilities at this point. Thank you.
Yeah, and you bring up a valid point, Mr. Luna, and I think the delicate issue is just because there's a variety of programs in that specific building. So we don't want to diminish, obviously, what Mr. Lee gave up, but at the same time, if we have another individual that goes on to great success, then at what point will they come back and say, hey, can we name the health science part, you know, such and such, or, you know, something to that nature? And that's where the little difference is. I think if it was a standalone ROTC building, it'd be much easier to make that decision versus it being housing multiple CT programs within it. And that's where it just is a little sticky because, you know, there's some people that are not involved in our JROTC that are going to that building. And I know we want to honor someone that gave their life, but I don't really want to confuse some pieces there, but it's definitely the will of the board, and it's something that we can definitely continue to have a discussion on. All right. Is there any other comments, concerns, or clarifications? I think, I mean, I guess we have to give Mr. Soto an idea. I think from what I gather, perhaps various options that have been presented to the team, to the individuals that are coming back, and perhaps a template of some sort or some sort of financial supports that that group can provide to us to you know, find a way to help us meet those costs when it comes to it. I don't know if you guys know how much it would be to make some adjustments like that or modifications. Mr. Soto or Dr. Hinojosa, would y'all know?
We can have the architects figure out a cost on signage without them charging us.
Yeah, because I don't think it's just, hey, just put the name. I'm sure it's something else that would be wanting to recognize it. And then I know that the signage is kind of hard to see because the signage is on the inner part of the parking lot. So you're never going to see it unless we put it on the side of the school. Yeah. Because if not, you're covered by trees and things like that. So those are some things that we really have to consider. Is there anything else that we can provide Mr. Soto and his team guidance on how to proceed? All right.
Board of Trustees, do you want this item to come back in the August board meeting once we gather this information?
But we can gather that information. I think, that's an opportune time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
This,
do you want that item as informational or action or depending on?
it may vary, depending on the information that's provided by the group.
Okay.
I think that's important still too.
Okay.
All right, moving on to item 7B. Consider and take appropriate action on the request to award RFP 200-107 extended day services to the Boys and Girls Club of San Antonio for an estimated amount of $343,702 with funding from the City of San Antonio After School Challenge Program. Mr. Soto.
Yes, Ms. Gallegos. And Mr. Flores.
Yes, good evening, Mr. President, members of the board, Mr. Soto, Superintendent of Schools. The Harlandale Independent School District Extended Day Program provides services to approximately 1,500 students in grades K through 8th enrolled in HISD schools at 13 of our campuses, 9 elementary sites and four middle schools. 10 sites are funded through the ACE 21st Century Grant, and the remaining 3 sites are funded out of the City of San Antonio After School Challenge Grant Program. The Extended Day Program is a collaboration between the district's community partners. Extended Day programs mesh collaboratively to provide a high-quality extended day programming with HISD students. These services follow the district's curriculum, TEKS, scope and sequence of instruction. It also helps promote increased attendance, increased state assessment scores, grade progression, and enrichment activities. Proposals for RFP 200107 for the provision of extended day program services were opened on July 11th, 2024, after posting the district's notice of intent in the Heartbeat and inviting 8,407 vendors on the district's online procurement portal. Review the district's requirements and offer proposals. 7 responsive vendors submitted proposals. In conjunction with the curriculum and instruction and the student support services departments, staff recommends that RFP 200107 be awarded to the Boys and Girls Club of San Antonio for the provision of extended day program services for an estimated yearly cost of $343,702. This cost will be funded by the City of San Antonio After School Challenge Program. The term will be for 1 year from the board approval with 1 additional year renewal option. And at this time, the administration is recommending approval.
Any comments, concerns, or clarification related to this item? Ms. Cavazos?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Flores, is this what we had in place last year?
Yes.
Thank you.
After school program.
Ms.
Mr.
Ortiz,
Chair.
sorry.
Really quick question, Mr. Soto. Any of those after-school challenge programs, are they specific to, do they equate or match up with what we're doing inside our schools to help our kids get better scores on the testing? And if they do, how long is that program? Is it all year or is it just half a year?
Ms. Gallegos, correct me if I'm wrong, but they do provide some enrichment programs for our children that do go to the after-school Boys and Girls Club. The length of it, Ms. Gallegos, I know they end a little early. I don't know the exact dates.
Good evening, Board of Trustees. I'm Reina Gallegos, Director of Student Support Services, Special Programs and Purchasing. To answer your question, yes, the after-school program that we offer starts immediately after school and ends at 6:30. We offer it year-round from the 10 months from school starts to school end. Unless we have holidays or emergencies where we have to shut down and stuff, then we make adjustments to that. But we offer a curriculum program that is based on TEKS. So that is about a 45-minute program. And then they do the enrichment. All of the enrichment programs that we have do correlate to the TEKS, to curriculum. So they are getting not only hands-on experiences that are enrichment, but they're also learning math, science, reading, a lot of those that we kind of correlate. For the City of San Antonio and also for our ACE 21st Century Grant, the primary 2 areas that they look at as far as STAR scores that we have to report to them are ELAR scores and also the math scores.
Any other comments, concerns, clarification on this item? And on this one, we are going to have to make a motion. So just to be clear on this item.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Ms. Ortiz.
I move that the Harlandale Independent School District Board of Trustees award RFP 200107 for extended day services to the Boys and Girls Club of San Antonio for an estimated amount of $343,702 with funding from the City of San Antonio After School Challenge Program.
All right, we have a motion by Ms. Ortiz. Do we have a second?
Mr. Chair, I'll second.
Okay, Ms. Reese, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. Motion carries. Again, we appreciate the Boys and Girls Club and all they provide to our district and the additional enrichment and after-school care that they provide. And I know they're really invested in being a part of our communities here in the South Side. So we're glad to continue that partnership. Moving on to item 7C, consider and take appropriate action to approve Howard Technology Solutions for furniture and sound equipment for CTE Education Center purchase through the Buy Board Purchasing Cooperative under contract hashtag 661, or I'm sorry, excuse me, number 661-22 in the amount of $69,011.70 funded from Bond 2022. Mr. Soto?
Yes, Ms. Casey?
Yes, Mr. President and board members, this was not presented at our workshop. We did not have the information at the time of the workshop. However, it is a timely purchase as it will be hopefully approved and it will be installed during the renovation of Carol Bell. Bond 2022 expanded our CTU programs at Carol Bell Education Center to include cybersecurity and networking. This item through Howard Technology Solutions includes a large-scale video monitoring wall for cybersecurity and network surveillance, as well as audio systems equipped with speaker systems to enhance communication and safety within all of the trade labs. The specialized equipment will create industry-based learning environments, enriching students' experience as they prepare for industry-based certifications. Staff recommends approval of the purchase of furniture and equipment needed for the CTE Education Center through Buy Board for an estimated cost of $69,011.70 to be funded from Bond 2022.
All right, any comments, concerns, or clarification needed on this item here? All right, would anyone like to make a motion to approve? Ms. Cavazos?
Yes, but before, I'm sorry, I did have a question, Ms. Casey. Will this be everything that we need for that building? Or everything that we need right now for the students that have registered to participate in those courses at CTE?
I don't know that answer. I could get that. I can get for you if anything is pending on ordering. This is for our labs. And so the equipment that they're actually installing with the architects. And so I can ask that question. I don't know the answer to that.
Thank you. I was just curious if you can find it. If not, don't even worry about it. But yeah.
All right. Anyone else have any comments?
Mr. Chair, I
Ms.
have a
Reese?
question. Ms. Casey, so what we are moving to vote on is going to cover, the purchase is going to cover the video monitoring wall and network surveillance as well as the audio systems. That's what we're approving, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Ortiz.
I move that the Harlandale Independent School District Board of Trustees approve Howard Technology Solutions for furniture and sound equipment for the CTE Education Center at Carol Bell, purchased through the Buy Board Purchasing Cooperative under contract number 661-22 in the amount of $69,011.70 funded from Bond 2022.
All right, we have a motion by Ms. Ortiz to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Cavazos. I don't think any further discussion is needed. We'll go ahead and call for the vote, please. The vote, please. Motion passes and motion carries. Moving on to item 7D, which is consider and take appropriate action to appoint a delegate and alternate delegate to the TASB Delegate Assembly on September 28, 2024 during the TASA TASB Convention in San Antonio, Texas. So I guess before we move forward, I will share, it's always a tradition to have our newest board member. So if Ms. Salazar, you don't mind being the delegate, it is a good learning experience. Is anyone willing to be the alternate?
Mr. Chair, I'll be the alternate.
Okay, well, thank you, ma'am. We'll go ahead and make a motion to approve. Well, you okay with the Ms. Salazar? Sorry. Move to approve, Ms. Erica Salazar as a delegate to the TASB Delegate Assembly on September 28th, 2024 with Ms. Rebecca Ruiz as the alternate delegate. Now, do we have a second? Second by Mr. Luna. Prior to this, would you like to share anything before moving forward? No, we're okay. I've done it numerous times, so it's okay. So we'll go ahead and call for the vote. Hopefully Ms. Salazar accepts it there. Perfect, thank you. Well, I appreciate you guys for taking the initiative. I know it's always interesting, but it's always a learning experience to gather around a lot of the other school districts that will be in that huge ballroom. So moving on to item E, consider and take appropriate action to appoint a TASB candidate endorsement for Region 20 position D. So I'll take the lead on this here. I had a couple of our grassroots directors from Region 20 reach out to me and just wanting to create some sort of uniformity and support and harmony amongst Region 20. And I think some of us have met those individuals at the last grassroots, Mr. Rich Senna and Miss Ginger Frisenhan. So they just wanted to say if we could just give them a public endorsement and they would greatly appreciate it. They both provided me letters. I'm not going to read them to you guys, and they're pretty long. But overall, they just set their commitment to pushing and moving the focus of what our Region 20 wants to continue doing within TASB and within the actual information that we get shared. So just the TASB relations amongst our directors and us as board members here. So are there any questions or comments or concerns about this? Yes,
Mr. Chair, I just want to question are we being asked to support a certain individual or just to endorse?
Just to endorse. Actually, they're running unopposed. So they said, we don't necessarily need the endorsement, but we just want us to have a collection amongst Region 20 to say that we're all united together. And I think that's a noble approach to take. So that's why they reached out. But they are running unopposed to those positions. So it's they would be our representatives in terms of the grassroots. Any other questions? That was a good question, sir. Sorry, I didn't say that. But if you like, I'll make a motion to endorse for the Region 20 position D, Mr. Rich Seta and Miss Ginger Frisenhan. Was there a second?
Mr. Chair, I'll second.
Second by Ms. Reese. All right. We'll go ahead and proceed to the vote, please. And I believe it doesn't have to be like a formal letter or anything, just a formal support. Yeah, public, yeah. Just an acknowledgement, yeah. All right, we can close the vote. All right, thank you, guys. We'll move forward. Item 8, A and D, which is convened in closed session, is authorized by the Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, Sections 551.071 through 551.084. Discussion and take possible action on recommended regular personnel report to include administrators and principal TGC 551.074. Item B, discussion regarding intruder detection security audit TGC 551.076. Do we have a motion to convene in closed session?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Ms. Reese?
I move that the board convene in closed session as authorized by the Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, Sections 551.071 through 551.084, items A and B.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, a second by Ms. Cavazos. We'll go ahead and just call for the vote, please. Ben. Oh, you got it. All right, we could close the vote. Motion carries. It is now 7:54 and we are in closed session.
Mic check 1, 2.
All right, good evening, everyone. It is now 8:15 still, and we are back in open session. No action is needed on item 8A or 8B. Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Ms. Ortiz.
I move that we adjourn.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn by Ms. Ortiz. Do we have a second?
Second, Luna.
Mr. Luna, seconds it. Any, discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Mancha.
just real quick, I'd like to say thank you to Mr. Soto and his staff. Those presentations that we've been being presented, sir, I love it. It is something that I've been here, this will be my 13th year. It is so easy to understand, so breakable. The passion that they have, it connects with them and then it connects to you, sir. So thank you. Thank you for your passion, and your respect for the district.
Thank you for sharing that, sir. Any others before we move on? All right. We'll go ahead and call for the vote, please. All right, it is open. All right, we can close it. Motion carries. We're now adjourned and it is 8:17. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully it makes it home safe.